Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another one of these Light and Land live streams. My name is Sam Gregory, and I'm going solo tonight, and we're trying something a little different. So there's a lot of things going on. I'm not going to lie to you tonight. A lot of things could go wrong. I'm hoping none of them will. But as ever, it's great to be with you. And if you want to drop me a little comment in the box, let me know where you are and where you're watching this from. That would be fantastic. And the point of this evening is we're going to go from pixel to print. And the idea being there that we're going to pick out an image. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the composition, the location, and then we're going to actually get into an edit. And I'm going to walk you through some of the editing steps that I would do in this image. And then, fingers crossed, we're actually going to try and print this live as we are here. Now, as I just mentioned, this is a slightly different way of doing it for us. Usually we have a guest and we talk to them about their images, and that buys me a little bit of time to moderate the comments and things like that. Tonight, though, I won't have that time, and I'll just be focusing on the image. So I've set a 30-minute schedule for this. I have no idea if we're going to hit that or not, if I'm being completely honest. But what I would suggest is if there are questions that as we go on to do with anything to do with the picture, the location, the editing, maybe the printing as we get there, just drop them in the comments box and I'll do my best to pick them up. If I don't pick them up whilst we're doing it, I'm going to spend a few minutes at the end of the live stream just going through any of the questions that I might have missed and taking any other photography/printing related questions. What I should say at this point is I'm fully aware that there's many different ways to do many of these things in Lightroom, and also that I'm not here to give you a full how to print or edit in Lightroom. I wanted to just let you guys see what I might walk through in an image edit and point out some things to do with how we should consider our images, and then a little bit about printing. In half an hour or 45 minutes, I cannot teach you everything you need to know about Lightroom and printing, okay? That's not what I'm here to do. This is kind of a free-for-all where you can see how I work. Hopefully you might pick up some things or think about some things. And a bit like a chef approaching a new dish, I have an idea of where this is going because I know what the eventual print does look like in real life, having edited this image before, but it will be slightly different tonight. But I'll try and explain to you as I go why I'm doing certain things, because I think that's super important. And hopefully at the end of it, we'll have a nice print to look at. Right, that's enough of me setting the ground. Hopefully you all get a good feel for where we are and we can have a nice evening of it together. I've got a few little polls as per usual. And what my first question is going to be is, do you use Lightroom for your editing? Because I'm going to use Lightroom here, and 99.9% of the time I edit on Lightroom. And I don't do anything in Photoshop unless it needs major things removing is usually what I do in Photoshop, if at all. So I just was interested to see how many of you use Lightroom. If you don't, it's not the end of the world, because all the things I'm going to be talking about are to do with the image edit. Now, the tool you might use to edit, could be different. It could be in Photoshop, it could be in Elements, it could be Focus, it could be whatever it is you use, it doesn't matter. The principles about light, shade, and where we're directing the viewer are going to come into play. So I just did want to ask though, because I suspect a majority of you do use Lightroom. And for those watching live on Facebook, you can take part in the poll depending on your device. Now, final caveat, and I know I've talked a lot and not done any editing yet, so bear with me. If there are any technical problems, if something drops out, if the screen goes funny, I've had the occasional issue with Lightroom just going white in the middle of the screen during a stream. Someone just pop something in the comments and I'll do my best to resolve it. And like I say, there are many different ways to skin a particular cat, and I'm just going to show you how I would skin this particular cat. So let's get into it. Thank you all for letting me know where you are. I can see some of the usual suspects, which is fantastic. And as I say, keep the comments coming. I will grab them as and when I can. So first things first, everyone should be seeing my Lightroom. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of info on this image. And at certain points, I'm going to switch off my camera, partly so I can concentrate and partly so that I'm not in the way of the histogram, which is just hidden up here. So every now and then I'll switch myself on and off, but I'll obviously keep talking so you know I'm here. This particular image was shot in the Dolomites, where a lot of you will know I do a light and land tour, and we go there in the summer. And this was actually a few days before last year. So I was there on my own. I always get a few days, either at the beginning or at the end, for me to do some of my own photography. And so you can see here, this was at 4:50 in the morning. So yes, that is an early one, everybody, for summer sunrises. And we're on the Alpe di Siusi, which is a very, very beautiful alpine pasture. And if any of you watched my live stream a few weeks ago with Charlie Waite, I was talking about my images, and this particular one was in there. So I got up nice and early, and I wanted to get out, and I knew I would be one of the only few people, in fact I was the only one I saw that morning, in and around. And because of the temperature and the prevailing conditions, we had this lovely low-lying mist. And what you're seeing in front of you is just the raw file. Nothing has been done to this. This is just a copy of the original raw file. So I'm just going to get rid of the information, just show you there. 31 millimeters it was shot at on the Nikon Z 24-70, f/16, ISO 64 and a quarter of a second, should it matter. There wasn't really anything moving, so we don't need to get into worrying about shutter speeds there. It was just simply put it at the aperture that you want and let the time be whatever the time needed to be for the exposure. So in terms of an edit, you come into Lightroom and you would have a few 10s, 20s, 30s, however many pictures from your trip. And the first trick is trimming it down to which are the ones you want to edit. Now, I'm not going to get into that much now because we want to concentrate our time on this particular image. But one thing is just to go through, use the star system, use the rating system, use the flag system, however your process is, and just pick out the ones without doing any edits. This is what I do anyway. And I just pick out the certain ones where I think compositionally that's strong enough for me to actually make a start on. And then I'll go back and I'll just view that selection of, say, 30 or 40 out of a couple of hundred, whatever it might be. And then I might do some base level edits, and then I'll probably whittle down again to another 10 or 20, and then I might leave it and I might come back a week later or whatever it might be. You know what it's like. Sometimes you just get in the mood though and you just plow through them. But let's say we've chosen our image, which obviously I have for tonight. And why I've chosen this is it's very calm. It's very, there's lots of space, and we've got this lovely mist. Now, what I would say is at the time, I very much wanted this in black and white. And actually I did, excuse me, I did shoot it in black and white. So on my Nikon Z mirrorless camera, I can view the image both on the live view and in my electronic viewfinder in black and white at the point of capture. Now, for the purposes of tonight, I've switched off Lightroom importing that black and white, and I've just let Lightroom import the basic raw file with the color. So in terms of my workflow here, the first thing I'm going to do, and this is going to be the slightly tedious part, I'm afraid, is I like to dust spot the image first so that I'm not fiddling about or getting caught out with that later on. So some of you might actually be able to see, for example, there's a great big spot here. This is obviously when Lightroom decides to go super slowly. Thanks very much, Lightroom. But there's a number of them throughout, and there's a couple of different ways to do this dust spotting. And let's just pop into the develop module so we can do that. Now, little thing I would say, mirrorless cameras tend to have a lot of issues with dust spots because, well, for various reasons, but I've had issues with this on the Nikon. However clean I try and keep it, I do end up with a few dust spots. Now, the way you're probably all going to know and be used to using is this little tool here, which you can make larger and smaller. And again, it doesn't matter what the software is you're using, but if you use Lightroom, you'll know the tool I'm talking about. And what I'm actually going to do is just shut my camera off for a second so you can see everything that I'm doing. So bear with me while I do that. Okay. This tool allows you to just clip it and clone things out. Now that's all fine, but what's quite difficult is sometimes seeing all the bits you need to see. So on the tool, there is a visualize spots click button just down here in the low left. And if you click that, it takes it into this kind of pencil-y mode where you can then zoom in. And my normal procedure would be to start up, excuse me, let's knock that one out. Start up in the corners and just, as I see them, spot them, clip them, get rid of them. And then we just use the page down function. And as I say, I'm going to see quite a few here. So I'm going to do an extremely rough job on this. I wanted to show you though, one other way to do it. Okay, so I'm just going to unclip that for a second. Another way which looks horrific, but bear in mind everything we do on Lightroom we can go backwards on. And I found this actually quite useful. It's not going to be in any book or manual, and I'm sure people who are Lightroom aficionados would probably think I'm completely nuts. Just bang the dehaze up, okay? Just temporarily, bang the dehaze up to 90-ish and give yourself a little bit of extra exposure as well. Now that looks horrific. That is not what we're going to be editing it like, and sorry, let me just make that a little bit better. Oh, there we go, lovely. Oh, it's decided it wanted to kick us out, so sorry about that. Let's try that again. All right, don't panic everyone. We just had a minor issue with Lightroom there. I'm going to bring us back in. Okay. And we should be back with us now. And apologies for that. Like I said, we might have the odd issue with Lightroom. It's just struggling a little bit to do the streaming and keep up with the editing, but hopefully you'll be back with me in a minute or two. You're going to see me first, and then you're going to see the image as well. And what I'm going to be doing, just while you guys are coming back online, I'm just going to be zipping these little dots out, okay? And just getting up here in the corner. I'm just going to zip down, keep my eye out for any down here. I'm not going to worry about anything at all in the grass. It's really the sky things I'm going to worry about for now. Okay, so this is an alternative and probably not a particularly fantastic way to do it, but it works for me. I pop the dehaze right up, and I'm going to take that little strip of sky out there. And what you'll find is you'll see these little bits here. Now, the benefit of doing it this way, and hopefully everyone's still with me and they can see this, is that unlike when everything's in black and white pencil-y charcoal in the visualized spots, I can actually see what it's replacing with here really easily. So I can see if Lightroom's making a good job of knocking out any of these little spots. I'm just going to quickly whiz through. Okay. And as I say, this is the most tedious part, all right, everyone. It's going to get much more interesting and more fun after this. But I think that you need to start with a fully spotted version before you get into it any further. Because the worst possible thing is to come to the print or the final edit and realize you have any nasty spots. I'm just going to whiz through these for time purposes. I also do this again at the end just to double check that we don't have anything weird going on. Okay, now after you've done your spotting, just double click on the dehaze to take it back to where it was. And I'm just going to double click on the exposure also to take it back where it was. So that adding of the dehaze is a temporary thing just to allow you to see some of the spots that you might not find normally. Okay, hopefully everybody is still with me. Sorry for the minor technical glitch along the way. Now, we've done the boring bit. And we're now going to make what I call a snapshot. So after I've spotted, after I've taken all the little spots out, I would create a snapshot saying V1, and I would say spotted. And what that means is if anything goes horrifically wrong anywhere, especially tonight, we can go back to that snapshotted version, and it means we can start from there as a base point with all our spots removed so that we don't have to go back and do that again, because frankly, that wouldn't be much fun. Now, you guys know, if you've seen the header for this, that this is a black and white image. And as I say, I shot it at black and white in the time. So for now, I'm actually just going to click it over into black and white this way and just let the profile be the normal Adobe monochrome. There's things we could do with regards to looking at presets. And that was an interesting point in the chat with Adam. Okay. Just minor problem with the mic there. It's all going wrong tonight. Apologies. The poor old computer is struggling. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. We talked about presets and using them. There was a general feeling that it's slightly dangerous to use presets because you don't just want to slap a preset on and expect that to be the finished article. And I think we understand that. We know that sometimes you only use a preset to give you a starting point. What I would say though, is that it's like a chef. I'm going to use this quite a lot tonight. If you happen to know that your presets of spices or flavorings in food are going to work with a particular image and get it pretty close, then I don't think there's a problem with going that way. However, I would only ever use it as a bit of a guide and a starting point, perhaps if you're a bit lost. The best practice is really to think about every item and doing them individually through the panel here, and knowing why you're doing something. I suppose that's the main thing. Now I'm just going to stop my video again, which shouldn't stop the whole thing happening, but it should just knock me out of the way of the histogram, which you can see up here. Now, from the point of view of the image itself and the data we have in the image, I would say that's pretty good. We're not losing anything, we're not clipping anything. As it stands though, this is a pretty flat looking file. Now my aim in this image is sort of threefold. It's to keep it as a fairly soft black and white feel. I don't want it super high contrast or really crunchy or really edgy, because that is not reflective of the mood. And our edits, in my opinion, should commonly be reflective and sensitive to the mood as we found it. And in this case, it was fairly soft and gentle, and that was the vibe I was looking for. But I want to introduce some tonal contrast between the foreground, the sky, and just give a little bit more dynamism to the image, which does generally feel a little bit flat as it stands. And the other thing I want to do is kind of focus the viewer on the middle of the frame. And I want to sort of expand a little bit on these white highlights of the mist and the sky, and just give it a slight ethereal, otherworldly feel. So what I'm actually going to do first, and we're going to get into the edit now, is I'm going to just pump the exposure up a little bit. And often I will work fairly close to the right-hand side in terms of pixels and histogram and everything else. So I'm just going to pop it up a half a stop there. And obviously we've seen then that this raises the lightness in this gray area, but really I'm looking at actually the whites and the lights. And what I want to start doing at this point is cramming a little bit more of that in. I want those whites to be pretty crisp and pretty clean. And so I'm actually just going to start pushing highlights in. And you can see here I'm pushing the highlight bar up to about 50. And you can see that the histogram is moving to the right as we're introducing more data into that higher tonal area. As well as that, I do want to bring these shadows down, and I'm going to do a local adjustment on that in a few minutes. But for now, I'm actually going to just introduce a little bit of a reduction in our shadows. So bring this down roughly to about here. And as I say, we're going to do a little bit more work on this. And if we just go back a second to here, and our black and white, we've gone from here to here. Okay, now this is all part of the work in progress. I'm going to keep adding a little bit more of these whites, and I'm going to pretty much push that as much as I can. And you can see now we're just starting to clip, and that's okay. I can bring that down later, or I can make a tiny adjustment to it now. And all the while I'm keeping an eye on these things, and sometimes I will take it a bit too far, and I'll come back to it later and have another look at it. In the interests of reintroducing some density and some darkness, I am going to do a local adjustment, but I'm also going to bring these blacks down. So what I'm doing through the whole of this process is stretching and pulling and manipulating this histogram left and right to introduce some more contrast, but in the areas that I want it to come in, instead of just whacking the contrast bar straight up, which you'll see I haven't actually touched. Now, we mentioned softness before, and I'm just going to check in on the comments just while I take a quick pause if there's anything coming in here. Okay, nothing that I need to answer. I'm actually going to just reduce the clarity a little bit, which is not something you see people do a whole lot of the time. Often we're pushing clarity in and we're trying to sharpen things up a little bit. But I'm actually just going to bring that down. I want this to be fairly soft because that's my mood, and it's softening some of these transitions between the mist, the sky, the mountains, and obviously the white sky above, which I kind of want to just become a glow, a whitish, quite a bright glow. So first things first, we would deal with these global adjustments, and that would get me maybe 75% of the way there. It does, of course, depend on the image. But here I'm starting to feel like, you know, this is sort of going in the right direction. In the tone curve, that allows us a little bit of extra manipulation, and people will use these differently. They might apply a set S-curve, for example. I'm just looking again at moving some of these areas here, which are about here in the histogram, and I'm sort of finding them here. I'm just pushing them up a little bit more. And I know we're clipping slightly, but we're going to come back. We're probably going to deal with that a little bit later on if it's still an issue. And I'm just introducing a bit more darkness here. So this is using the tone curve. And I would treat that as sort of a fine tuning of what you've done on your global adjustments. I'm fully aware that there'll be a lot of people watching this who have their own way of doing it, who probably might even be screaming at the screen right now saying, don't do that. That's cool. We're all chefs cooking our dishes in different ways. I'm happy with how I do it. How I do it might vary depending on the image. It might vary depending on the end result. If I'm wishing to print it, put it online, and or put it in a book, for example, they all might be slightly different edits. But hopefully you can get an idea for where we are. Now we can just see that there's a little bit of clipping as I hover over the histogram here. It's just showing a little bit of clipping up here. And we've got another problem as well. This half of the image, this quadrant, this quarter in fact up here, is quite light compared to this side of things. So one way potentially to deal with it would just be to bring in a slight graduated filter across this side. And what I'm looking to do with that, we just drag that in a little bit, and obviously depending on how much you drag it, it will affect where it goes to, and this last third of that will be the sort of transition area. So I'm kind of just going to leave it. Good old Lightroom, it's conked out again, so let's just restart that. Sorry everybody, however many tests you do, it always will decide to go wrong on the night. I'm just going to start my video so you guys can see me again, and what we'll do is we'll just share the screen. As I say, it's just struggling a little bit on the processing, but hopefully you'll be back with me any minute now. And what I'm going to show you, and I'll be brief for fear of it crashing again, is that this graduated filter up here, as we can just see the overlay there, that's the area it's affecting. And what I've done is I've reduced the exposure a little, and I've reduced the whites a little, and that has just taken our blinkies away, our highlight clipping away from that top corner, but it's left the rest of that whiteness and brightness in the frame, which is what I wanted to do. Now, I'm just going to check in and check everybody's still with me. And as I say, apologies for the cutouts every now and then. Hopefully I'm saving them in good time. Now I'm going to whip my camera off again because you guys can't see the histograms. Let's just do that. Okay, so we're now getting a lot closer. And what I'm actually going to do is just put another snapshot in saying V2 working. And again, that might just be if we have any issues dropping off of Lightroom or anything like that. It will help me get back there. But if we go back to our first conversion to black and white, this was where we started, and this is now where we are. Now I'm conscious of the fact some people watching this might think that I'm doing a lot. Some people might think I'm not doing much. I think I'm not doing a huge amount in that this is very much how I foresaw it. I was already shooting it in black and white in the camera. And what we're really doing is finessing now. There's a whole big conversation and topic about people understanding editing. Have you photoshopped it? All the usual stuff. Now we know as photographers that that's a very hot topic, because if you shoot a picture with your iPhone, it's already doing editing because it's editing it to a JPEG or whatever it might be. So all we're doing, as we all know, is starting from a RAW, and we're introducing the elements that we want to do, just as they would have done in the darkroom. Now, with that in mind, I'm going to pick up one particular local adjustment that I mentioned I was going to do. And I fear slightly that Lightroom is going to conk us out again. So let's see how we go. I'll explain what I'm going to do first. I'm going to just darken down this foreground a little bit from the bottom up. So I'm going to have it darker here at the bottom, and it's just going to leave a little bit more lightness up here. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to bring the viewer, I want that to be a soft sort of buffer at the bottom of the frame. And I want to bring the viewer up a little bit. So let's give this a try If it kicks me out again, I'll bring us back on. I thank you all for your patience. Who knows what it's going to do when I try and print. But let's do a new graduated filter. And I'm actually going to be a little bit bold here. I'm going to just pump it up around this area. And what I'm going to do is just bring this in at a slight angle. And that's potentially a little bit too much. Let's try that. Okay, and if you notice there, I did bring it in at an angle, and I do tend to do that commonly. I don't know why, it's just a little habit. I don't tend to like there just being dark lines in a single way. I prefer for us to do that in a slight angle, like I say. So it has, as I suspected, just kicked me out again. And this is good to know. We're learning that it doesn't like grad filters. All right, now we've got a little bit of too dark down there. So what I'm actually going to do is just bring the blacks up here, and that will just solve that for now. So thank you everybody for your patience. I have tested this a few times, but until you go live, you just never know. Hopefully you guys should be seeing my Lightroom again though now. And I'll even just show you I'm still here, plugging away. And I appreciate a lot of you have stayed with me on this, that you haven't been diving off through the technical glitches. So I really do appreciate that. All right. Now, if there's any questions at this point, let me know, because there is a little bit of extra editing I would do. I'm slightly nervous to do that because of the Lightroom drop-offs, but I'll explain what it would be just so you guys know. And time-wise, we're sort of doing okay. If I trusted Lightroom at this point of the evening, and I wasn't live streaming this, the one extra thing I would do is I would go in and I would put a very faint layer of plus exposure, just about, I don't know, a small amount in the mist, okay? Just to lift that mist up a little bit more. So giving it a little bit of extra highlight and brightness to separate it further from the surrounding grasses, which are obviously green in reality, and obviously tones of grey in our black and white here. So I am slightly nervous about that because of the issue we've had technically, and I suspect it just can't cope with me doing more detailed things. Excuse me. But if I did do that, and heck, we could even try it quickly, I would use the adjustment brush. I would make a new one, and sorry, I'm going to just do it with exposure, probably in a really small amount, and a little bit of highlights, for example. And you can have the auto mask on or off. What that does is it just stops it from bleeding over the sides. I'm just going to sort of paint that in. It's going to be really subtle, and I understand that on the screens and the devices you may be watching this on, you might not see it very easily. And I'm going to do a horrific job just because I'm really scared of going in and doing more to it because of the Lightroom issues. But I'm just bringing that up a little bit more. And so especially in this area, I just want it to really pop out a little bit. I'm thinking that's potentially a little bit too much, but this is all testing, just checking we've not clipped anything. So if we look at it before and after that, really, really subtle. You can see it a little bit more in this area. Like I said, I've done a horrible job on that, but that's okay. The other thing I might do would be just to make sure there's enough separation here between the mountains and the sky. I want that to be quite diffused and those to be a little bit soft. So you could spend some time bringing some darkness back in there, but for me, my eye is going to slam into that. And I want this to be the darker area and for us to gradually go through the image. So at this point, I'm going to just do a quick save. V3 ready. Okay. And what we can do now is we can take it into the print module. Okay, so I've sort of pre-prepped this, knowing that where we were going to come in. There should be something else I should do as well. Before you get into the print module, I would actually soft proof it. And what this does is it sort of simulates how the image might look with your particular paper. So this is going to be a topic for another day, but paper profiles. and perceptual and relative and all these things I'm going to get into on another talk if you would like that. But what the soft proofing allows me to do is it will change depending on the rendering intent. So in Lightroom between perceptual and relative. And if you watch, I'm going to just knock my video out for a sec. If you watch the histogram when I move between the two, perceptual and relative, you'll see a slight change in those. Okay. And you'll see a very slight change in the actual image. Now, there is no right and wrong. You have to treat each image as it comes. And what you're looking for in the soft proof is that the data in the histogram is not exceeding it. So we're not going out of gamut, which means it's dealing with with colors the printer can't manage, and to check that we're not clipping the highlights or anything like that. So just really simply for tonight, there's nothing alarming me particularly in here. That's pretty close, but we're going to be okay. And I'm going to stick with platinum etching. Or let's try it with NST bright white, actually. Okay, great. Let's do it with that because I've printed on that and I'm ready to print on that. And you can see what that's done, actually. We're getting really geeky now, is it's changed this, and that green, should we be doing it in color especially, has now dropped in and is a bit more within the range of the paper. So you'll find that certain papers have different ranges of tones and especially white points and black points, and especially color gamut as well. We cannot go into that today. That would be way too much. But we're going to just use that as a check, and I think I'm pretty happy with that. One thing I would say, actually, just final thing there, when you do go to soft proof and you see the white around the image, suddenly this does not feel quite as bright anymore, does it? We can really see that that is just light shades of grey. Whereas if we have the grey background surrounding the image, and you can change this in your Lightroom or your Photoshop, these feel quite white. So do look at it with a variety of different background images. Commonly, the brighter the better, in my experience, just to see how that might come out print-wise. Now, we are at the half an hour point, so I think I'm ready to hit the button and we'll try and print this. We've had some fun tonight, so I suspect the next thing that could go wrong is the printer plays silly with us, but hopefully it won't do that. And what it might do while it's doing its thing, I might check the comments and see if there's any questions, and I might even put up a poll. But before we do that, many of you will have struggled in and around the Lightroom print module. I did for many a year. And I'm going to come out with a little poll here, actually, is quick one here saying, do you print at home? I'm interested how many of you do your own printing or how many of you might send it out. So if you're watching live and you can take part in the poll and you see it on your device, just give us a quick answer there on the do you print at home, which should just be popping up on your screen in a moment. Now, while this poll is coming in, I know there's a lot of reasons why people are worried about it. The cost of the printer, the cost of the ink, how to do it. The biggest thing I see is people worrying that the print doesn't match the screen, and there's various reasons for that. And over the course of a few of these pixel to prints, I'll try and pick up on some of those. But what I would say is if you really want to get on top of this, then you need to spend some time on a proper workshop, a one-day workshop or a weekend workshop. And obviously at Light and Land, we do a number of these. Adrian Beasley does a number of Lightroom workshops. Adrian Beasley and Andy Farrer have got a print one coming up soon as well, where they walk through editing and printing. And to get the full use of it and to be comfortable sharing at home, you're going to need to go on one of those and spend the time doing it. Okay, I cannot cover all of those things on Facebook for you. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly show the results in the video. 56% of you say you do print at home, 44% of you don't. Now I'm going to ask you one final question. Thank you very much, everyone, for bearing with me and sticking with us through the fun and games. Do your prints come out matching your screen? And I'm really interested to know how many of you, bearing in mind 56% of you print at home, for you guys, do your prints come out looking kind of how you think they're going to look? All right, so if you can see the poll and you can see that on your device, as I say, drop us an answer on there. While that poll comes in, let's deal with a couple of reasons why it might not come out as you expect it to. The main issues are to do with screen calibration and to do with using the paper, using an ICC, custom ICC profile for the paper that you are using. If your screen is not calibrated, and if you're not using a custom ICC profile, which we will talk about another day, then the chances of you getting what are on the screen out in the print are pretty much zero. If you've got a custom ICC profile and your screen is calibrated, and we can cover what that means another day, then you should be getting pretty close to what you're seeing. There are reasons why you may not, but you should be getting pretty close. So I'm going to quickly close that down just for time purposes, but 62% of you have said that yes, what you see is what you get, which is good. But 40% of you, or 38% of you, say that no, you don't actually get out the printer what you see on the screen. Okay, now we're not going to be able to fix all of those problems now, but there's a couple of things. Like I say, your screen, your monitor needs to be calibrated and calibrated regularly to stay in calibration. And there are various tools to do that. The Spider 5 Pro, I think it is the main tool that a lot of people use. It's a little thing you plug in the back on the USB. It drops onto your monitor. It runs a test. The screen goes all weird colors. It measures the ambience and your screen, and it calibrates it for you. It's super easy, and it's the first starting point you have to do. The second thing, and where I'm going to just talk very briefly today, is that you want to have the correct profile for the paper. So different papers have different ink laying capabilities, and each paper will be able to give you more or less of certain things. And you need a custom profile to work with that paper and with your printer. Now, I use PhotoSpeed gear all the time. I use PhotoSpeed paper. I'm sure a lot of you do as well. And they will provide you with a free custom profile for the paper and your printer if you're buying paper from them. Now, I'm not here to promote PhotoSpeed or anybody in particular, but they are very, very helpful, and they will always make sure you get up and running and things kind of work how you might expect. Now, for the purposes of today, I've already set the page setup to A3. And you can see that up here. Paper is set to A3 because that's what we're going to print it on, and the printer that I'm using tonight is here as well. If you needed to change that, you just go down to the page setup on the bottom left corner, and you can punch in A3, A4, you can do a custom size, whatever it might be. And if you ever find your images looking the wrong way up, then this is the way just to change the orientation back into landscape mode, okay? So we've checked all of that. What I'm going to do is tonight I'm using NST Bright White, which is the paper of choice, and it's the paper I use a lot of with black and white images because it really does print them very well. I'm going to just pop my camera back on so you guys can see me. And I tend to keep the guides on in Lightroom just so I can see the edges of the frames, and I tend to have the margins all set the same so that the image is sort of centered within the frame. That can be a slight source of consternation, and I know people do struggle with that, but again, I'm not going to go deep on that today. Print resolution, you just want to make sure it's ticked to whatever the best thing is for your setup. Commonly that's 240 ppi or 300 ppi depending on your printer, so you can check your settings and what works there. But come on everybody, let's do it. What could go wrong? The short answer is probably quite a lot. The final step is to make sure that we are controlling the output and that we're letting Lightroom use the profile of the paper that I've selected here. So I'm not making any print adjustments, and in this image I'm also not adding any sharpening after the fact or anything like that. I might do that normally, but that would involve taking it out of Lightroom and into a sharpener, and actually for this image I'm not bothered about doing that. I want it to be quite soft. NST Bright White as a paper has a little bit of sharpness on it already. So what we do is we click printer, and it will come up with the last used settings with my Canon, which is a little bit annoying because it doesn't remember what you've done. But what you want to do might depend if you've got an Epson or a Canon. I can only show you the Canon tonight because I don't have an Epson plugged in, sort of ready to go. But what we would do with the Canon settings is we would choose fine printing on plain paper. And then here in this next drop down, we have something called quality and media. And what we want is to choose the photo paper matte photo paper, because the photo paper I'm using tonight is a matte photo paper. I'm just going to give the paper a little wiggle to get any of the dust off it. Matte photo paper, and the print quality is high. I'm just double checking I've not messed anything up whilst I've been chatting away to you. I'm going to print it as perceptual, just because that looked slightly better on the soft proof. And I'm also going to click the grayscale printing here, because it is just a black and white image with no color inside it. And that tends to be the best way I've found in my experience to get the black and white to be truly black and white without any color cast. So that's all looking good to me. I am going to hit print. Now, what I fully expect to happen is that my printer is going to have a little moment and either do nothing or decide that now's the time for a deep clean, because that's the only other thing that could be fun for it to do right now. And in the meantime, whilst that's doing its thing, it's working on it slowly. You won't see it, I'm afraid. I can't pivot the screen to look at the printer, but I will grab it as it comes out. What I'm going to do is just check that's going through. It seems to be. Yep. I'm going to jump in and I'm just going to see if there's any questions that you guys have. And if not, I've got another little poll that we might look at. Okay. So a couple of questions here. And it's going to be tricky because the mic is going to pick up some of the noise from the printer. So such is life, everybody. I'm going to try and pick a few of these questions up. So just bear with me while I jump in on here and I'll have a little look. Okay. So I can only go back a certain distance on the live stream preview that I can see. Do I use custom or generic profiles? Okay, well, I've answered that. You definitely need, in my experience, custom ICC profiles for your paper, or for the paper you're using, and specifically for your printer. And Photospeed have done some very good how to install ICC profiles on a Mac or on a Windows on their YouTube channel, so you can check those out. Very easy. And if all of this just sounds like utter nonsense and you can't even face talking about profiles, downloading, printing things, they can even do a thing where they take over your screen and do it all for you. Okay, so it's really easy. Question about soft proofing to a second monitor. I don't think that works, does it? Nigel, I'm going to be completely honest. I've never soft proofed to another monitor, so I can't offer you a sensible opinion. And if in life you don't know, you just have to say, I don't know. I do know people who use double monitors, and so perhaps Adrian Beasley would be your man for that. Question from Paul, how do you get the key line in Lightroom? Paul, if you're still watching us, I'm not quite sure the key line, I'm not quite sure what you mean, so I can't quite answer that now, but do pop another comment, I'll try and pick up on that. Ken, another question, what was the result of the first poll, Lightroom versus non-Lightroom users? The result, Ken, was 72% use Lightroom. A question from Jordan, I think it is. What printer would you recommend for home use? Crikey, I'm going to be honest, I don't know if I'm qualified to give you the right answer. I think commonly just having an A3 size printer at home is enough. I know there are various Canon options and various Epson options as well. If in doubt though, I would suggest you talk to someone such as, again, I don't just want this to be a Photospeed fest, but talk to one of the guys at Photospeed. They would have some advice on that and they would know a lot better than me. What I'm using is a Canon Pixma IX6550, which is a good number of years old. It wasn't expensive, but actually for most of my printing from home, A3, A4, it's absolutely fine. I think it was 250 quid. I don't think it was any more than that. I do outsource prints sometimes for people if they want them bigger than that, or if it's a project that I can't manage quantity wise, I will outsource, but everything else I would do from home up to A3 size at the moment. And can you explain the difference between perceptual or relative options, please? Yeah, I did think this was probably going to come up, Adriano. I could give you probably a really bad explanation, so I'm going to give you a cursory explanation. It's to do with how they treat the in-gamut colors and whether they replace it with a similar thing next to it, or whether they just kind of guess based on what's within the actual image. Now, I appreciate that's probably not the most professional professional answer, and that is why you don't see me doing Lightroom workshop weekends, all right, because there are people who know a lot more about it than me. What I would say, though, the pertinent bit to take away is that knowing what it does and what it doesn't do is only part of the answer. Really looking at it in the soft proof and checking what's happening within your histogram in the soft proof is the really pertinent bit. And over a period of years and just experience, I've come to kind of know what works on certain images. And for example, most of my black and white stuff is perceptual, whereas color, you might need to think about either or, and sometimes you might print both and have a look at them and see which one actually you prefer, because the screen representation in Lightroom in your soft proof is okay, but it's never as good as actually printing it out, which is an expensive way to do things. But what I would do is I would get an A3 piece of paper and I would think about the 10 things I might want to print, and I would just print them out really quite small on that A3 piece of paper, and use that as kind of a hard proof and let it dry for 24 hours. That's the other final thing, and the print's coming out, by the way, and we haven't crashed, which is great. The other final thing I would say is that if you do print a black and white image, or indeed color image, do leave it a good 24 hours to dry before you make your mind up about it. And especially I find black and white images, they can come out, and depending on the light in the room, it's horrible in here tonight because there's no natural light. You might think there's a slight cast, and actually when it's straight off the printer, you will actually see there's a slight cast or feel there's a slight cast. But when you look at it after 24 hours when it's dried properly, it won't, I promise you, it won't be there if everything else has been set up properly. Okay, now that is just kicking out, and I'm gonna just check. All right, cool. Now you guys are gonna get a really crummy view of this, I'm afraid, but I kind of just want to hold it up just to prove that we've got there. Okay, so just bear in mind, you're seeing this through a 5-year-old webcam, through a Zoom, through a Facebook stream. Okay, so I'm going to tell you from my point of view, and I've got a Kaiser daylight balance light behind my screen. I've got another one over there which isn't on at the moment, but I can see the monitor that you're seeing, and it looks like there's a slight coloration up there. There is not. It is absolutely spot on, and I'd be totally happy with that. It is purely monochromatic. So super happy with that. There again is your print, everybody. We did it. I'm going to see if I can just pick up a couple of the other questions, everybody. And like I say, I'll give you a few more minutes. If you do have them, do hit me with them on here. I'm just going to pop up a quick final poll, okay? For those of you that have stayed with us this far, thank you. I really appreciate it. All right, I didn't know how it was going to go until we did it. You can test, but you don't quite know how the Facebook stream is going to affect things. But I'm just popping a quick poll up asking if you guys have actually found this useful, because if you have, I'm happy to do some more. I'll put another 50p in the meter at home, and hopefully that can deal with the streaming situation. But if you can see the poll and you're still with us and you're on a device where the poll is showing, do let me know if you found this useful, okay? And that would be really helpful for me and for the Light and Land team. Nigel Cook has mentioned if you're going A3, suggest A3 plus. It means you can get A3 print plus a border. Yes, that's true, Nigel. Otherwise, if you're on normal A3 like this, you're always going to have your border here. So what Nigel's saying is with an A3 plus printer, which don't tend to be much more expensive, your actual print, so that the area that the image is on can be up to A3. So that's fair enough, Nigel. Couple of other ones. Okay. Different Nigel Cook. So that's confusing, but I know both of you Nigel Cooks. If you get an image with a lot of gamut warnings with a certain paper, do you decide against that print, or have you seen acceptable prints, even if there has been a lot of gamut warnings in Lightroom? Great question, Nigel, actually. And the answer is I've probably only run into images with a lot of gamut issues once or twice. And yes, I did actually change my choice of paper because I knew what I thought I was going to put it on probably couldn't cope with it. And what I did end up putting it on had a lot more flexibility. So maybe next week I'll show you guys if okay, well, 100% of you who've answered at least have found it useful. So thank you. That's good. Through the course of these chats, I might get into things like profile sizes and how they work, custom profiles, sorry. And you'll see that, as I've already said a few times, certain papers, basically, there's a 3D model of it you can see on your screen. And some of you may have seen videos I've done before, I've showed people that, but it shows you that certain papers have a lot more capacity to take highlights or darks or even color. So to answer your question, Nigel, yes, if there's a lot of crazy gamut stuff going on, I would do two things. I would see how much of that I can modify in the soft proof, and you'll usually find it's one or two colors that are causing you the problem. And you can often find you can just individually attack those in the develop module. Or I would use a different paper, yes, which could take it. There's an excellent example of this, which from a colleague of mine for Light and Land, who I printed an image for a set of videos we were doing. And I'll try and talk to him and I'll try and get you that image for next week or another session, excuse me, the next time I do this, sorry. And I'll show you what a complete nightmare that was for that reason. All right, good. I think I've pretty much covered everything there. Okay, sorry, final thing, Paul, you've mentioned it appears to have a stroked area around the image. That is just the guides, Paul. So if I knock that off in the show guides area there, then that gets rid of it. So that is just the cell size, i.e. this bit here of the image. And if you see, if I move that, for example, it changes. So that's just showing me that cell size. And all it is a guide on the screen. As soon as I knock off show guides, that's what's going to print. And so if you're ever worried whether you've done that or not, just clip up the show guides thing there and that will take it off for you. Cool. All right. Well, I think I've pretty much covered everything. As I suspected, we've gone way over time, but that's no problem. We are going to be back next week and I'm going to be talking to Astrid McGeechan on a classic virtual tour where we're going to go through some of her images from Bruges and indeed from York. Now, after that, and I'll need to remind myself of the weeks, but we're going to do something, myself and Adrian Beasley, again about editing and really about creative interpretation. And what we're going to be asking you to do is to send us in some of your raw files, and then Adrian and I are going to pick out just a handful of them, and we're going to separately do edits on them to show you a couple of different ways to interpret images. Okay, so that's more of a creative interpretation than a how-to, but hopefully that'll be fun, and hopefully it will give you guys some way to show you other ways of approaching things, and how Adrian might work and how I might work. You'll probably see it quite different. And again, it's not right or wrong, it's just how we work. So stay tuned for that. I will let you know next week how we're practically going to ask you for those raw files, but have a think through. And if there's images maybe that you've struggled with in the past to edit to a point where you're happy, or images you've just taken and you'd like a different approach on it, maybe have a quick look through your Lightroom catalog and see if you pick a couple of those out and get them ready. And we're going to ask you to submit them at the next virtual tour. So just join us on that one. Fab. All right. I think I've pretty much covered everything. Could I make my video full screen and show the print? Oh, I see what you're saying. Forgive me, Nigel. Very sensible. Yes, I can do that. So let's do that. Let's drag that out a little bit. Get my mic out the way. Okay, there we go. As I say, it's really not doing it justice because of the lighting in here, I'm afraid, but hopefully that gives you some idea. And as I say, I can promise you that is as monochromatic as it possibly can be. Good. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you joining me. I'm going to wrap this one up, but hopefully I will see you again next time. And we're going to do a pixel to print once a month. That's the plan. But I'll be back with a full schedule next week. And for now, good night. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.